Hello and welcome to the Cheshire Audio Christmas special. This is a bit of a spur of the moment thing. I thought if Morecambe and Wise can do it, why shouldn't I? Let's have a Christmas special. I think I mentioned in the previous video there was somebody in comments came up with an idea that I quite liked actually. I've done the retro reviews and I've done unreliable products and all that sort of thing. And somebody suggested, why don't you do products that were really good that were never as popular as they should have been, which is quite a good concept actually, because the more I thought about it, the more I thought actually there's loads. It's quite a big subject. There's lots and lots of products out there that particularly I thought were really good, and they just never quite got the sort of notoriety of the reviews or anything that any sort of coverage really, I suppose, that they should have done. And it was either because it was a product that was from a manufacturer who was known for something else. There's quite a few that's probably the reason they didn't sell. There's a lot that weren't marketed very well. There's quite a few that were slight quirks in a range that were way better than they should have been compared to the other models in the range. So yeah, I'm going to do that one, and I'll just keep going until I run out of tea. I think is probably the way to go with this, because like I say, I haven't really planned this. I've got a few models. I've thought of a few things that were possible to talk about, but there's probably too many to do in this video. So like I say, I'll just keep talking till I run out of tea, and then I might do another one at some point. But I just thought it was good as a Christmas one. It's quite a good one to do, really. By the way, this isn't Christmas Day. Obviously this is pre-recorded. I'm not that mad. I don't sit in the shop on Christmas Day. Yeah, the first one that came to mind was QED, who 70s, 80s, whatever, were known for speaker cables. I mean, they were probably the first people to actually produce a cable that was a speaker cable that sort of dedicated upgrade for over your standard bell wire. The first people sort of said that it was an important thing to do. I mean, it's QED 79 strand. I still sell it. It's still a sort of a bare essentials, really. And they're also known for switching boxes and your little speaker switching boxes, so you could split. You could run two pairs of speakers off an amplifier and switch between, and headphone boxes and all sorts of things. They had a huge range, stuff like that. I went down to the factory. What year would that have been? And they made everything themselves. It was fabulous price. And they came out with an amplifier, well, a range of amplifiers. I can't think whether it was just a single model and then it expanded, but they did an amplifier called the QED A230, which is a little MIDI-sized amp, quite slim. And also there was a 240 CD and a 240 SA. So the 230 was a little stereo amp, 30 watts, just had volume control, balance and some inputs. And the 240 was same design, but 40 watts, sort of better componentry in it. I can't remember that was. I don't think it. I was going to say it's probably the 240 CD was just line level. I don't think it was. I think it did have a phono stage in it. But there was a model above called the 240 SA, which was the super analog, and that had a really good detachable. It was at a phono stage which was detachable. So I think you could upgrade a 240 CD with the board out of that. So this is my memory going now. But anyway, they had a range of amplifiers. And I don't know, thinking back now, I don't think many people remember it. It was, because the thing about it was the particular little 230 was almost like a little miniature name amplifier. And its competition were things like the Creek 4040, the NAD 3020, there's various sort of amps around that sort of money. The 230 was cheaper, and actually quite a bit better than all of them. But if you talk to people now, nobody says, "Oh, do you remember the A230?" I've not come across anybody who really remembers it. They'll remember the NAD that they had, or the Creek 4040, but never QED. And I actually wonder whether, because I was managing Braziers in Liverpool back in the 80s, and it was our best-selling product. The A230 was our best-selling product. Now I'm beginning to wonder whether we were one of the few dealers who appreciated how good it was. And it was probably because it was a specialist amplifier from a company that was known for accessories and cables, and it just, I think a lot of people may have just ignored it. I think dealers ignored it, and I think the buying public ignored it as well, because why would you want something with that brand name on it? I was going to think of a modern equivalent, but I can't bring a thing to mind, to be honest. But like I say, just it's because the brand name didn't quite equate to high-level audio. 240 was a sort of more refined version of it, a bit more power, and then the SA was superb. The preamp in it was amazing. And they also did a standalone preamp, which was called the C300, and there was a power amp called the P300, which was very good actually. I don't think they were quite as outstanding as the little integrateds were. It was good, but it was better than the 230, 240, but it was coming into territory where there was other competition really. But yeah, the QED, and later on they went on to produce, because when I went down to the factory, Bob Abrahams, the owner, took me into his office and said, "Oh, look at this! This is really exciting," and unrolled like a big blueprint. I said, "Oh, what's this?" Because it was like just all these lines everywhere and boxes and things, and looking at it, thinking, "What the heck's this?" And he said, "What this is?" He said, "This is the future on here. This is the future." So this is a main controller, which has got 4 amplifiers in it and lots of inputs on the back. And then we'll have little wall panels which can control that. You can have 4 different rooms with different controllers in it, and the speaker outputs on the back, and you can run the cables to different rooms. So that will mean any room that you're in, you can control the music back from the main box. So what hi-fi dealers will be putting cables into walls, and they'll be fitting speakers in the ceilings, and they'll have this big box, and you can add all the things to it. And I thought, this is nuts. Nobody's going to do this. Why would you want music in every room like this? Why would you do that? I thought, that's never going to work. And that was the original blueprint for System Line, which was massively successful. They're still producing. It's getting more and more complex as you go on. There's all IP addressable things, and you name it now. Shows how much of a Luddite I am, because no, I don't like the idea of that. That's never going to catch on. I can't imagine hi-fi dealers channeling walls out and putting cables in. But no, I was proved wrong. And I think System Line is their main product now. I think that's what the sort of QED are now. I think Bob sold out years ago, but yeah, System Line, but very, very big success story for them really. But the amplifier thing fizzled out. They didn't really do anything after that little range of amplifiers. They were finished, and that was the end of it. Nothing like that ever again. They did do a little turntable. Was it called an R232, which had a bit of a following for a while, but yeah, it wasn't. That never really did as well as it should have done, really. Apart from QED, the other company which were a bit like that were Alphason. And I mean, if you talk to people about Alphason now, they'll say, "Oh yeah, they make great tables," because they were, they did do some really nice tables, nice sort of hi-fi furniture and speaker stands and all that sort of thing. But before that, and way before that, it's Mike Knowles, isn't it? Mike Knowles, yeah, he designed a tone arm called the HR100, which was really ahead of its time. It was probably one of the earliest sort of high-end tone arms that was properly designed, and some real thought went into it. It was properly sort of mathematically and scientifically designed, not just slap some bearings together, whatever. It was properly designed, really, really good tone arm, and it's probably still one of the best tone arms ever made, I think, really. So certainly probably the top 10 best, certainly British tone arms anyway. And that had a bit of success, but somehow, I don't know, I think they produced quite a few other bits of hi-fi. There was the turntable was called the Sonata, and the Alphason Sonata was an astonishingly good turntable. Probably again up in the top few turntables ever made. Really, it was a rock solid sound, really big acoustic off it. I think it was quite a heavy deck actually. It was quite a high mass deck. Better than a lot of things that were available at the time. Never really sold. I mean, it was quite a rare, quite a rare thing to be sold at all, really. Everybody liked it, but it never seemed to sell. Also their range of amplifiers, they did a decent couple of integrateds. There was a pre-power that was quite good. There's a pair of speakers that were very good, and all, you know, all really good for the money. I mean, and I think the problem with Mike was, I think he probably did underprice things, and whether that made people a bit unsure, or whether his marketing wasn't very good, or I don't know. But I remember these things being around and thinking, yeah, that's really good, and then just never selling in demonstrations, even though they could sound better than the competition. They never seemed to sell. There was just something about either the design or whatever, but sonically, everything he made was brilliant, really. I think the amplifiers were a bit shaky reliability-wise, from what I remember, but certainly the turntable was really good, and obviously the tone arm, which used to crop up on all sorts of, I used to see them on Sondex and Pink Triangles and everything with HR100s on. I believe there was a bit of a comeback going on. I think there was something about an HR200S tone arm being produced, which I've not really. I don't know much about that. Whether that, I'd be interested if anybody knows that, to put it in the comments. If that is the case, if there is a sort of Alphason comeback coming, that'd be an interesting one. Other than that, there's. I was trying to think of what individual products. There was. I mean, funnily, this product kind of fits into almost all my video categories. You could do a retro review on it, and you could put it into the most unreliable products ever review. But the Pink Triangle LPT, to be fair, it did sell reasonably well, but I don't think people quite realised how good it was, because it was the cheaper version of the Pink Triangle Export. Well, there was a PT2 and then the Pink Triangle Export, and the LPT was sort of a budget Pink Triangle for people. So it was it didn't have any suspension, hardly. It sort of had a bit of a similar arrangement to the Roxanne Turntable. It had a bit of a cutout around where the tone arm is. There was a top plate, and it was cut out in a shape so that to try and break up any transmission of vibration or whatever from where the tone arm is and where the bearing was and everything. And it had a little bit of red tubing that filled the gap. And that was way better than it should have been for the money. I mean, Pink Triangle's equipment is always like that, but this was exceptionally good value for money. Not that far short of the model above it, really. It was, considering it didn't have suspension, it didn't sound that far short of the Pink Triangle Export. The problem with it was that it turned out it was more expensive to make than the Pink Triangle Export was. So the cheaper model cost Pink Triangle more to make than the more expensive model did. So it kind of died a death. I think they did a price rise, and then it sort of died a death after that. But it was very, very labour intensive to make. I think it was CNC machined. It was a big, very, very thick piece of MDF, CNC machined out, and then all these layers put on and the power supply put in. Again, and I will talk about this in another, when I do the turntable video, I might talk about Pink Triangle a lot, actually, because pretty much everything they've made had reliability issues. You'd kind of forgive them, to be fair, because apart from the fact Arthur is a really nice guy, their stuff is brilliant, and I had a Pink Triangle Export for years and loved it, but you just had to be ready for the fact they were going to fail. Things were going to go wrong with it. But anyway, I shouldn't talk about this because this is for the unreliable video. But anyway, as I do, I'm drifting on to other things. Now the other thing I was going to talk about, actually, NAD, who are known for amplifiers and tuners, and there was a bit of a flurry of them being very well respected, or very well reviewed for cassette decks, their monitor series. But their turntables, I mean, mostly their turntables have been based on Riga. 533 was a sort of OEM version of a Riga 2 with an MDF platter. Generally, the tone arms weren't. I think it almost felt as though the Riga tone arms, the ones that Riga used, were batch selected, and the ones that were left over were put onto the NADs. Because sometimes the only time I've ever known Riga arms have faults is when they were fitted to other people's turntables, really. But other than the Riga Riga variants that they did do their own design called the 5120, and I should have checked what that was called. Yeah, 5120, which was a bizarre, absolutely bizarre design. I mean, there's so many easy ways to make a turntable, but they decided to do a budget turntable with 3-point suspension. The design was really odd. It looked almost like a child's record player. It was quite compact, and had a lid that just sloped down. And when it opened up, there was 2 side panels, and then the platter, which sat very, very low. The platter looked actually quite cheap, but it was recessed, so you couldn't see most of it. But the oddity about it was the first generation. I mean, they changed it later on because I think they were worried it was affecting sales, which it probably was. Was the tone arm was a flat, about this wide, and just completely flat, and the cartridge just bolted to that, and it was flexible. It would actually bend. There is actually, it sounds crazy to have a flexor, because with tone arms you're trying to get a rigid, as rigid as possible, and this was a flexible tone arm. There is a logic behind that actually, and I'm going to do a video on accessories. Mounting speakers, you use spikes and try and get them as rigid as possible, or you go the other extreme and make them so they've got a movement. As long as you can control how much movement there is, it's actually quite a good way of isolating things. It sounds a bit very contra logic really, but I think the idea of the flexible tone arm was that it could flex, but at a very low frequency, way lower than anything that could cause issue. So in some ways you were controlling that resonance and taking it right down. So you didn't need to make it rigid because none of that resonance was working its way out. Telephone. Let's listen to the telephone. Where is it? Oh, is it one? What is that? Okay, I'm back. Finish it. Have you got a second-hand P10? No, we haven't. Yeah, the 5120 turntable was extremely good. It was better than the duals and things like that at the time. A bit quirky to use, and it was a bit odd, but it looked cheap. And the suspended, people buying at that sort of price level weren't used to having something with this sort of 3-point suspension. I mean, the dual had it, but it was less obvious on the dual. The dual was sort of the whole top plate was suspended and the whole thing moved, whereas the NAD, it was just the platter and the arm wobbled around and did all this, and people were sort of put off by that a little bit. But it was really good. It was, and I can't think that I ever sold more than 2 or 3 of them actually, if that. And it was, if you got past the look of it and the quirkiness of the design, and actually got it in front of people for them to actually listen to, then you know they'd appreciate it. You know, oh yeah, it's really good, but I like the look of the Riga more, or the dual, or whatever. So it tended to stumble on that really, which is a shame. Yeah, because it was, like I say, a very innovative design. Somebody somewhere had really thought it through and really, you know, at that price, it was pretty much unique, really. Yeah. So after this, oh yeah, and this is going to be the last one because the tea's running out. Haybrook. Haybrook were known for speakers, and they did some very good speakers. I mean, everybody probably remember the HB1s, possibly the HB2s, might even remember HB3s. Weirdly, I don't think I ever heard a pair of HB3s, and I don't know why that was really, but the ones and the twos were superb. It still sounds superb if you ever actually hear a pair. Later on, they did a range which included 2 models that were called, I think it was Quartet and Sextet, which were a bit more high-end, well, high-end, but sort of middle to higher end. And around that time, I mean, they'd sort of experimented with things before. They had a turntable in the 80s called the TT2. And I suppose actually we should talk about that really, because that was a product that was very, very good. It was, if you squinted at it, it looked like a Sondek. If you looked at it more closely, it looked like a very, very well built Sondek. It was much better made, very solid, very heavy deck, the TT2. Same principle, 3-point suspension with a separate arm board, you know, a fitting for any tone arm you wanted. Rarely sold. It was cheaper than a Sondeck, but it was, people tended to go for a Sondeck or go for an Ariston, go for a system deck, whatever. But the TT2 always seemed to be overlooked, and it was a shame because it was so close in performance to a Sondeck. I think it was let down a little bit by its bearing. I'm struggling to remember now why. I think the Lynn has got a really good bearing, and I don't think the Haybrook was quite in that sort of league, but everything else about it was really good. But what I was going to talk about actually was their amplifier. They experimented a little bit with amplifiers, and they did some integrators. I don't actually really remember the integrators, but there was a few bits that they made. But they did do, and I should look these things up before I do these videos, you know. The amplifier was called, there was a preamp and 2 monoblocks. There may have been a stereo version, there may have been a pre-power, but I remember the preamp and monoblock version. I think it was called Haybrook's Signature. And it was brilliant. That was a really good amp. I think, this is, you know, just looking on Google would have helped me with this. I think it was designed by Tim Parravicini. So if you, let me know in the comments if that's right or wrong. I think it was. But that was a fabulous sounding amp. And it was quite a good look, quite an interesting look. It was sort of this sort of size, frontage. And the preamp and the power amps were all the same size, sort of almost like a cube, well, square front with a, you know, quite deep that way. But they had wooden panels down the side, which matched the quartet and sextet, which is why I mentioned them. So you could have a Haybrook system, and it all had the same look, the sort of wooden end pieces. And then on the speaker we'd have the grill, but on the amplifiers there was a panel with the controls on. I have a feeling the preamp had, unless I'm remembering something else, I have a feeling the preamp was a dual mono design internally, and it had 2 volume controls. Yeah, so you had to sort of turn up the right channel and turn up the left channel. I'm sure that was the Haybrook. What I do remember is that it was very, very good. But like a lot of the things I've talked about before, like with QED or whatever, Haybrook were known for speakers. So would you buy it, because it was quite an expensive amp. I can't think, it was more than the sort of mid-range name equipment at the time, I think. So would you buy, if you're spending a big chunk of money, would you spend it on an amplifier that was made by a speaker manufacturer, or would you buy from a company renowned for making high-end amplifiers? Yeah, it never, I can't remember ever selling one. I remember having one in the shop. I remember it being there for a long time, but I don't actually really remember ever selling one, apart from when the demonstrator sold, which is again a sad state of affairs really. But there's, like I said, so many products that were like that never really quite caught on, and should have done, because they were superbly well thought through, you know, good value or whatever. Yeah, so I'm going to edit there. Tea's almost gone. Thank you to the guy in the comments who, I should have checked what your name was actually, could have given you a bit of a name check. But yeah, thanks for the idea of doing this. I might do another one. Today, to be honest, my mind today has been a little bit too focused on things that need to be done before Christmas. I know this is a Christmas edition on Christmas Day, but we're actually 2 days before Christmas at the moment. So I'm still waiting for stock to come in. It's going to be a bit of a mad panic tomorrow to get things delivered. The phone never stops ringing, right on cue. So on that note, I wish you a happy Christmas, and I'll see you in a future video. Thank you very much. Better answer that.